What many thought was an earthquake or a plane crash that day turned out to be that massive explosion at Terra International. Tonight, I share the story of strength, remembrance, and friendship through the eyes of a family member 30 years later.
I think every human emotion I've ever seen was in that room that day,
Stephanie Schramm was just 15 years old. She sat waiting at the hospital with her family for any news about her father.
One of my dad's coworkers came across the room and found our family and just grabbed my mom's hand and said, "Jack's alive, and he's there, and he's helping people out. It's going to be okay."
John Weiland, better known as Jack, was a hero that day. He stayed after the explosion, helping pull victims from the rubble. Stephanie's uncle actually interviewed her father about the explosion. It wasn't until this year Stephanie found a book her uncle put together, sharing her father's accounts of that day.
People were coming out from everywhere. I caught my pants in the ammonia plants, but was able to rip them free. Then we picked up the first guy that was killed. By then it was 7:30 and it was daybreak.
For hours, Weiland helped victims, his friends, his co-workers get to safety. He managed to find his own truck and drove himself from ground zero to the hospital.
I looked to our left and my dad's just walking into the hospital. So it felt like in a movie, we just ran to each other and embraced. And I remember other people didn't get that same news that day, and that's hard to live through also, you know what I mean? Because you go through the same circumstances.
That same day, also at the hospital, reporting on the tragedy, was Bridget Breen, who currently serves as KTIV's vice president and general manager.
I'm doing a job because I want to keep people informed. We want to keep you safe. There's an ammonia cloud. There's all these different things happening. But people died.
The emotions were overwhelming for all who had a connection to December 13th, 1994.
And I'm going through all these, I guess, just emotions, but I didn't understand the significance until I got home. And my dad just looks at me and he goes, "Bridge, are you okay?" And I just looked at him and I'm like, "No, I'm not."
Two young women connected by tragedy. One daughter leaning on her father's comfort. Another thankful her father was alive. Fast forward 29 years later. Stephanie sat down to read Siouxland Woman, a local publication featuring her friend Bridget on the cover of the magazine. The article shared stories from Bridget's journalism career and led Stephanie to discover she and her friend had a connection they never knew existed.
They start sharing about how you were there during the Terra explosion and you were at the hospital, and getting footage and interviewing people.
A discovery of connection from two very different circumstances, some might call divine, forged later in life.
When I read that and I realized that's why, that is why I felt immediately connected to you. And every time I see you, my soul, it just jumps. I'm so happy to see you.
But all there because of that explosion. And always have had this, I've had this magnet to her. It's I see her and I was like, "Oh God, I just can't get enough of you." And it's just we've always been very energetic. Yeah. But to know the personal impact it had on her and her family and what it had for me and my career and even with my family, you just don't know what will happen in life that connects you to somebody or brings you to somebody.
As the two look back on items from that day, they smile, knowing life has a way of coming full circle and shining a light on the past and the future.
I love you. Oh.
And this was a piece of metal Jack Weiland brought home from the explosion site. Stephanie said her mother just gave it to her a few days ago, a piece of history and a symbol of her father. Weiland did return to Terra 4 weeks later after the explosion. Stephanie said it was really a difficult time for her father, but he went back to work helping to rebuild the plant. Weiland was not only a hero that day, he performed one of the most courageous acts of all. He shot off the water to the Missouri River to stop the pollution.
He had to go down somewhere close to the river to turn this valve off. And later, we would have found out maybe a year later they wanted to recognize him for that because of how he prevented pollution into the Missouri River. So they wanted to have him, awarded someplace in London for it. And that absolutely was not my dad at all. No.
And Stephanie said faith and the strength of her father's love is what carried her family through that time of hardship. On this anniversary, she says it's been a form of healing to pull together these memories from that day and share with Siouxland, just remembering her father, paying tribute to his life and the legacy he leaves behind. Jack Weiland died 12 years after the planned explosion. You can take a look back at these stories once again on News 4 Now.